Steven Universe ended a long time ago, and yet I still think about certain aspects of the show. I think often, for instance, about how Steven's mother, Rose Quartz, turned out to be Pink Diamond, the bullied and neglected sibling of sorts of the authoritarian diamonds who ruled many planets with an iron fist. This is a twist I was quite shocked about when it happened, and I made a video immediately about it that was taken down because of copyright nonsense. But the issue has still lingered for me, and it's one of the things from this show that has still lingered. It's an imperfect element of the show, but that's perhaps why it has lingered so much. Because it is about imperfection. It is about the confusion of people and the incapacity of people to fully understand themselves and understand the world in which they live, even as they're just trying their best. So perhaps the show's inability to fully establish a coherent position about her makes sense. Maybe it fits in some weird way. The tale of Pink Diamond or Rose Quartz is a tale of great love and of great deceit. Both of those things can be true. In the later seasons of the show, particularly season 5, the question is repeatedly raised about who is Pink Diamond. Well, of course, there is a utilitarian answer to that mystery. There is the answer one finds out, which is that it's Rose Quartz. That no one killed Pink Diamond. She just is Rose Quartz. But then there's the deeper, more character-based, more psychological component to that question. As in, who is Pink Diamond? Who is this person? And that's a more interesting issue. Stories are at their best and have the most enduring value when they look into these more rich, more character-based, more emotion and psychology and society-based questions, as opposed to mere plot questions. Plot questions have an expiring value. One wants to find out the mystery, and then one does find out the mystery, and when one does already have the answer, what does one do? Is there a lot of value in going back? Is there a lot of value in rewatching? Well, in some cases, sure. There are mystery dramas that handle their mysteries with such flair and such elan, to use the French term, that they are worth rewatching just for the sheer craft of it. Hitchcock is probably the best at this. But even in those mysteries, the greater focus, what really lasts, is the character drama and the relationship dynamics, the connections in all these characters' lives, their connections with themselves, their own minds, their connections with each other, their connections with the overall milieu, the overall world in which they live. The issues that works of art look at emotionally and psychologically are the same issues that people deal with in their lives. Maybe not in the exact same forms, but the essence, the latent, fundamental qualities of the ideas being discussed are the same. For instance, Hamlet is relevant still because we're still dealing with these questions of how to act, how to behave in situations of great uncertainty and unrest. His fundamental anxiety regarding his desire to act in an effective, meaningful way, and yet his incapacity to do so still resonates, even though we are not particularly interested in Danish history, and of course we are not princes and kings and nobles ourselves. What matters is less the external forms of the narrative, what it's overtly talking about, and more the emotional and psychological and sociological issues that it uses those external forms to discuss. What is it really getting at deep down? And art can do this particularly well. Percy Shelley talks about this quite well in his Defense of Poetry, one of the greatest essays ever written in the English language, if you ask me. I could go into great depth regarding this essay, and I have when I've actually talked about poetry, talked about art in a classroom setting. The value of art for Shelley is detailing not simply the morals and the beliefs of a particular writer, which are inevitably those of their own time and place and are thus limited, both to themselves and especially to posterity, to everyone who came after, but to look beyond one's own personal circumstances and be able to capture, through that disconnection, through that removal from one's immediate circumstances, through the distance created by that removal, one can see the passions and yearnings and laments of people much more clearly and much more lucidly, and through particular artistic language depict them with a vividness and an intensity that one does not have in ordinary life. In ordinary life, all these issues are at play, but they're blurred, and we cannot see them clearly since we can only see one side or one portion of them since we're dealing with them so directly. But with the distance provided by art and the specific elegance and precision of the artistic form, one can get at those ideas with a clarity and a vividness that is particularly useful, that remains relevant, that does not fade, that does not decay with time, but in fact only grows in stature. So, this, I think, is what the show, at its best, really gets at. Yes, the show is about a lot of outlandish speculative fiction dynamics, but it's very good at grounding those in particular emotional realities of people, and doing so with a vividness that is all the more bright, that is all the more visceral because of the particular setting used. It's a setting that's chosen to allow these emotional realities to appear with a clarity that a particular realist setting would not allow. There are very good examples of this, like how Stevani, the fusion of Stephen and Connie, and fusion as a whole, allows for a lot of interesting thought about problems of relationships. Not problem in the sense of bad, but problem in the sense of a challenge. A situation that we must face. Fusion allows for a more interesting and nuanced discussion about these kinds of relationships, particularly romantic relationships, by looking at them a little obliquely, by looking at them at the slant provided by speculative fiction, the diagonal perspective, instead of looking at it straight on. And the story of Rose Quartz / Pink Diamond does a lot of the same thing. It's talking about issues of abandonment, neglect. It's talking about the fraught relationship between lovers, between partners, and between parents and children. Pearl, for instance, is deeply hurt by the fact that she cannot fully be with Rose in the sense that she wants to be. She is not Rose's one and only. Now, Rose does not owe her that, but nonetheless, that unrequited longing is poignant, especially since Rose is no longer there. And at the same time, Stephen's increasingly complicated relationship with his mom and his legacy is that of a lot of children learning more and more about their parents. Especially parents who are gone. That lack, that void where a parental figure should be, leads to some degree of idealization, some degree of overestimating who this person was, especially since they do have this great reputation. But as one grows up and learns more and more, the situation becomes a bit more blurred and murky. He starts losing the unequivocal reverence he has for his mom and starts questioning her legacy much more astutely. Rose was not honest with a lot of people, and the show is good at talking about that. She also is in a bit of a complicated situation in regards to her relationship with Earth and the people who live there. And those are complexities the show gestures at, and I'm not really sure it particularly gets with as much nuance as I would hope. But the overall thing that the show is doing is interesting. We're introduced to Rose Quartz as being this grand defender of Earth, who saved it from invasion. Okay. Later we learn that Rose is actually Pink Diamond. Pearl is her servant, who stayed alongside her, fighting alongside her. And she was originally sent to take over the Earth, but in part because of her resentment with people who mistreated her, and in part because of genuine love and affection for the Earth, she slowly changed. She is perhaps not as reflective as one would want her to be. Her growth as a person, her psychological growth is quite clear, whereas her perhaps growth as a political leader is less so, in terms of to what degree did her perspective about the Earth genuinely shift. She does idealize it and its inhabitants in a lot of ways that the show, again, is interested in, but does not always know exactly how to frame that interest. It's not entirely sure what it thinks about her all the time. And I think that's perhaps a weakness of the show, but it's also one reason why I still keep thinking about this question, why I'm doing a video about it this long after the show finished airing. Because these questions are still relevant, they're still meaningful. A good example of the show engaging with the complexity about Rose is when she is forming a relationship with Greg, and we see that she loves Greg in her way. She finds him interesting, but to a certain degree she just finds him kind of cute, in the same way that one finds a dog or cat cute, as like oh, that's interesting. That's kind of adorable. But there's still that level of patronizing condescension that I think the show understands in that regard. But perhaps not always so much in others. Rose's rebellion is limited in a sense. She wants to fight for Earth because she likes this particular planet, not because she has come to this grandiose desire to completely refute her past biases and beliefs. She has a lot of blind spots. The show is good and at questioning how she lies to others, but the real issue is not so much one of lying as one of these questions of deep ambivalence regarding her role, both as someone who deeply cares about Earth, who genuinely fell in love with the planet and fell in love with its people, and someone who can be quite blithe sometimes, and even a bit selfish. The show does not always know how to square these different sides of Rose, and I think the end result is a portrait that perhaps does not work as well on a larger sociological, philosophical level, depicting these conflicts with Homeworld and this grand cosmic battle. But that's not what the show's focus ever really was. It's more on these psychological components. It's using all of these grand space opera, overwhelmingly elaborate settings as a way to look closer at these very particular psychological and emotional states of people and the relationships that are at the center of the show. And to that extent, I think the messiness of the show, the messiness of Rose Quartz, the messiness of the show's incapacity to really come to a firm conclusion about Rose Quartz, it fits in a weird way. She is the shadow that everyone is living in throughout the show. They cannot really escape that shadow. She is a major important figure for all these people. For Stephen, for Greg, for Pearl and Amethyst and Garnet and the like. Rose Quartz is always this invisible presence. And as the show progresses, as it reaches Steven Universe Future, what they have to do is ultimately make terms and come to peace with the complexities of Rose Quartz and ultimately move on with their lives and fully accept their own distinct identities as flawed but beautiful individual people in a complicated world. And I think the show depicts that quite well. So thank you all for watching. If you liked what you saw today, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Donate to my Patreon if you can. Do you want to see more videos like this before anyone else? Go back and rewatch Steven Universe. It's a really fascinating show to rewatch. Adios, comrades.